Hello folks, in this week's Midnight Guide, I'm going to take a look at what is changing for professions in the upcoming new expansion. Now, for any of you who played through either Dragonflight or The War Within, it is going to feel very familiar. For crafters, there are going to still be extensive skill trees that are going to take you a very long time to complete, very likely into the first third of the second major patch of the expansion. Crafted gear is going to remain a very important part of professions, and I'm predicting that there may be some higher demand for higher level crafted gear, mainly in the second half of the season, and I'll explain why I think that in a little bit. And if you are a crafter or a gatherer, you will be needing to buy your profession tools very early on. That all said, Blizzard have made a series of tweaks and changes, so let's start taking a look at what has changed. Back during the announcement of the Midnight expansion at Gamescom, we were promised a reduction in the number of profession ranks, and for profession materials at least, this is proven to be the case. For both basic gathering materials and crafted consumables, we will see the number of ranks being reduced from 3 down to just 2, something that I think is going to have some pretty major impacts to both gathering professions, but also professions like alchemy, which rely very heavily on crafting consumables. For gatherers, a lot is going to depend on how Blizzard balances the rank 1 and rank 2 yields as we level up our skill trees, but my overall expectation is that we can likely expect to get a lot more rank 1 materials in the early weeks of the expansion, with those rank 2s being relatively sparse. Something which I suspect will mean that rank 2 gathered materials will be pretty expensive, at least for the first month or two of the new expansion. My own personal prediction is that this is going to give gatherers who can get ahead of the main crowd, progress-wise, a bit of an advantage early on, and the benefits of focusing on a single gathered item to max out first in the skill tree is going to be a lot greater than it has been in the past, especially for people who manage to correctly guess which one of those is going to have the most demand versus limited supply. For crafters, this is going to make it a bit easier to make good use of concentration, as you'll be able to push crafts right the way to max level right from the very start. For example, on my completely unleveled alchemist, I'm able to push potions to max rank on day 1, albeit I would be limited to just pushing a single potion per day until I did go through the leveling up process. This means that I suspect the best strategy for consumable crafters will be to focus in on 1 or 2 legs of the skill tree and then use concentration to produce a steady trickle of other high value potions. Now for alchemists, I suspect that this will mean that the best strategy will be to focus on 1 or 2 legs of the skill tree at first, while using concentration to produce a steady trickle of other high value potions and flasks. Now if you did see the Gamescom discussion on crafting ranks, you may well be expecting me to now tell you that crafted gear is going down from 5 ranks to 3, but you'd be wrong, as gear is in fact staying at 5 ranks. Now that does not mean you were mistaken in your understanding. Blizzard did indeed originally announce that crafted gear was going down to only 3 ranks, but that decision was changed even before the Midnight Alpha launched. This means that gear crafting really isn't changing very much at all. That said, with only 2 ranks of materials in most cases, it is going to take you a bit longer before you will be able to avoid the need for rank 2 materials when crafting rank 5 gear, if you ever can. And this will very likely make rank 2 intermediate materials such as alloys even more valuable than the rank 3 equivalents were in the War Within, and could make focusing on these intermediate materials in the first season a much more attractive proposition for players. It's probably also going to mean that getting any rank 5 crafted gear items early on is going to be a lot more expensive, both in terms of material costs, but also if you need the crafter to use their concentration to push the final rank, as they're going to be able to charge a lot more for concentration as well. Now, in terms of getting those high level crafted gear items, With the removal of flight stones, the current half sparks are going away, and instead we're going to be getting a full spark of radiance every week, with those high-level crafted gear items requiring you to provide 2 of them, meaning that we're still going to be limited to just 1 high-level crafted item every 2 weeks for each character. On top of that though, we're actually going to be able to get 2 different kinds of spark. As well as the sparks of radiance, there's also a new spark of vanity. And if instead of standard 2 sparks of radiance, you instead use 2 sparks of vanity, this will cause the crafted item to be crafted at item level 1 with no stats, essentially making it a cosmetic transmog piece. And these will be warband until equipped, meaning you'll be able to purchase them for your alts. What this in essence means is that you're now going to have the option of obtaining the appearances of crafted gear items without having to spend your precious sparks of radiance. These new sparks of vanity are obtained by engineering using the recycling system, which allows engineers to break down crafted materials to yield other resources, which will now include these new sparks of vanity. Currently in beta, these are warbound and cannot be purchased via the crafting order system, which would mean you would actually have to be an engineer in order to engage with this system at all. Now that really doesn't make any sense at all to me, so I'd hazard a guess that when the game goes live, these sparks will end up being tradable on the auction house, something that could be quite an interesting opportunity for engineers to make some gold. And at the same time, I do think that these are going to create a lot of extra potential demand for gear crafting professions as well. And because the overall quality of a cosmetic item really isn't going to matter, I do think that this could be an area where we might end up seeing a lot more players being willing to submit public crafting orders, something that would massively benefit casual crafters. Now, one change that you are going to notice very early on as you start to level up your professions is quite a big change to profession equipment. As with gear, these are going to retain their 5 ranks, so no change there, but there are now 3 different tracks for each crafted equipment item. As well as the current green uncommon and blue rare tools and accessories, there are now purple epic versions as well. Now, my guess is that the purple versions are going to require maxing out in profession equipment in order to craft them at rank 5, so these will likely be extremely expensive and thus very lucrative in the first half of Season 1. And this means that profession fans should be prepared for the process of leveling up your professions to be even more expensive than ever. One thing that gatherers especially will be very glad of is that crafting equipment in Midnight is not going to require us to spend the new crafting currency, Artisan's Moxie. Instead, we're going to need another new material called Fused Vitality, which will only be obtainable from the new Abundance open world activity. I have done a separate video on that, which I will link down below, but the Abundance vendor will be able to sell you Fused Vitality for the new event currency, and this is something that I suspect that you may want to prioritize before you start to get any of the cosmetic rewards from the Abundance events. And that takes us around to that new currency, which is our last major change of note. The War Within's Artisan's Acuity is being replaced by Artisan's Moxie, and this is going to work quite a bit differently to what you're used to, as every profession is now going to have its own unique version of Moxie. For example, if you have a miner blacksmith, you will be receiving both Artisan's Miner's Moxie and Artisan's Blacksmith Moxie. As I already mentioned, Moxie is not going to be required for profession equipment this time around, something that I think gatherers especially will be very glad of. Instead, the main thing that we'll be spending Moxie on is going to be recipes, particularly profession equipment and Decker item recipes. And when you run out of things to spend your Moxie on, there's also going to be reagent bags, which will yield extra profession materials, and these will be focused on giving you materials for your specific profession. Now, just before I wrap up my review of profession changes, something that I think will be of interest to a lot of people is that we are going to be getting another small increase in our bag sizes, with tailors being able to craft 40 slot reagent bags and 38 slot standard bags. As usual, I would expect these to be pretty expensive in the early weeks of the expansion, and thus be very lucrative for tailors. As the materials required are pretty straightforward, I do expect that prices will drop away as we get towards the end of the first season. So if you're not in a hurry to increase your inventory space, it may well be prudent to be a little bit patient before you do go and get these new bags. And that's it for the main changes to Professions in Midnight. Overall, if you're a Professions aficionado, I think it's going to be very much a case of steady as she goes. As with the last two expansions, we can expect to get an early influx of skill points, with the usual 8 collectible treasures, 2 from each zone. And crafters will also be able to get the usual book with 10 extra points from one of the renowned tracks, with gatherers, which will include enchanting, getting their 10 points from the Abundance event instead. Overall, your early focus is going to be, as always, on power leveling your base skills until you unlock those skill trees, after which you'll be off to get those treasures for an early hit of skill points, and then have to decide what you want to focus on first. For the likes of blacksmithing, leatherworking and tailoring, that's going to be the usual choice between going all in on high-end crafty gear, intermediate materials, or those profession equipments, with of course tailors getting the additional option of getting those bags out onto the market as early as possible. Alchemists, enchanters and scribes will have the usual juggling act on second guessing which routes through the skill tree will lead to the most demand and the least supply, or maybe you'll decide to just stick with your current favourite niche to follow. And for gatherers, you'll have the usual easy and cheap level up process, with your choices being to either focus on maxing out a specific material as soon as possible, or going broad for the safe and steady income. And sadly for engineers, there isn't really anything super interesting like the War Within's gold sync mount to invest in, so you will likely be focusing on crafting guns for hunters, or perhaps taking a punt on making those new sparks of vanity. And all of the crafting professions can expect to get a brand new batch of housing decor recipes, but sadly it still looks that lumber is not going to be tradable, and I think that's a great shame, as it could offer a great new option for gatherers, as well as giving some relief for crafters who aren't fans of gathering. And that's it for my Professions overview. I'd love to hear what your plans for Professions in Midnight are. Do you already have a super secret niche that will be making you bank, or do you just want to own a full set of those juicy 38 slot bags? Comment down below. If you found this guide helpful, entertaining, and even just plain annoying, then let me know by hitting that like icon. And if you want to support my channel to grow and help me to make more of these videos along with my other content, then hit that subscribe button right now before you forget. If you don't want to miss out whenever I release a new video, then as well as subscribing, you can follow me in social media for updates. My links in the description below as well. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.